I gotta finish deleting. All right.
Are we live streaming yet?
All right, we're doing the silence in a second here, dear, so be silent.
My mic's suddenly gone really loud again.
Hey Josh, are we live streaming? Alright, good.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay. Are we all ready?
Ready.
Yes.
No, we're not ready.
Who's not?
No, that's fine. That's fine. Well,
Okay.
we're technically, the show is technically on. We're on the live show, so people that are there at 2 o'clock, they're getting the show already.
So,
All right. 3, 2, 1, record.
It worked that time.
I gave us a little extra because of
Okay.
the comment from Leo.
yes.
Okay, wait, I didn't know we were doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not here.
Oh, well, you better be because you're running the show.
No, I'm not.
Joe, you're up.
Be
All
ready,
right.
Joe.
Leo's doing all the talking.
Be ready.
Okay,
gonna-
now we
I'm
got
just
to do
gonna
our
follow-
zeros.
Yeah, we're going to do that as well.
Alright.
What's that?
Poke, poke, poke.
Who's
Set
doing
the
the
mic.
Well, I can do
Well,
it.
it's better to find that out now than 30 minutes from now.
Well, if it won't switch off, you'll just have to leave it on, and then when this silence is, we can just flatten it out.
Use your software switch again.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We'll deal with the clickiness.
Yeah, I can edit it out. It's not a big deal. If Oliver's listening, I had to remove a lot of those blue switches. Oh my god.
Was it a bit loud on his end?
He had to push the talk key. It worked out pretty well, but yeah, every time he pushed the talk, you could hear the blue switch go every time.
My mic volume keeps turning itself up.
Okay,
Yay!
yay. Let's
Josh
do our
works
3, 2, 1
best under
zeros
pressure.
then.
Right. Okay. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Over to Leo.
Over to me. Okay.
We can already tell that this is going to be an awesome show today.
No one's on point, which means that it's all gonna be. We're all gonna mesh
Over to
well
Leo.
together.
And it's all going to be Leo's fault. I already tell that this
That's
is going
fine.
to be...
You can blame it on me. I'll go
Perfect.
fight off the Twitter comments for us.
Okay.
Okay. Any last minute adjustments or additions or anything I should know about?
I've just put something in from the ether, so
my
you
God.
might want to have a look at that. It's a really long technical email.
Okay.
Let's rock and roll, guys.
Hold on one more sec, because I've broken myself. What do we? Oh, desktop environments. Finally in the feedback, and finally the feedback. Okay, cool. See what I mean? I read it. If you put it there, I read it.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're good. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think it's just me. Like I'm, in my mind, I'm not ready to start, but in my body, I am.
You got to move it, move it.
Right. I'm going to mute my mic while you do the first section.
Okay, had to get a burp out. There we go. So, are we ready? Anybody not ready?
Ready when you are.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to mintCast, episode 313. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. We're in the mintcast channel in IRC at irc.spotchat.org. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us on MeWe, Facebook, post at the mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram, Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. This is Leo, and with me today is Bo.
Hello, it's good to be back.
Tony Hughes.
Hi, Grow
Moss.
England.
Ooh. Oh, that's right. And
I'm
Moss.
still here, yeah.
Josh.
Hello.
And Joe.
Mostly here.
And we are live Sunday, July 14th, 2019. First up, in our wanderings, I do security training. Bo also trains in France. Tony goes on vacation and hugs his VPN tightly. Moss tries out Open Mandriva with more success this time. Josh replaces his PC with a new Raspberry Pi 4. And Joe reads more and considers creating a podcast. In our all-new security section, we talk about DNS over HTTPS. Then, in our news, Linux Mint is beta testing the 19.2 updates, Ubuntu considers ZFS, and Raspberry Pi successes and flaws, and more. In our innard section, we talk at desktop environments, and finally, we hit our feedback. This past couple of weeks, I have been security training. I think this is one of my favorite things to do of all time. I don't like traveling, but I do like just talking with a bunch of nerds, talking about different flaws and hacks and weird things that have gone on. I don't know, for years, really. Some of these hacks are really old, like SQL injection. Those are kind of falling off in terms of popularity, but there is no shortage of people that misconfigured databases. So it's never going to go away. But the new hotness is, and I guess this has been for a couple of years, the new hotness is wide open S3 buckets, or just block storage that's been pointed out to the internet that anybody can get to that was not supposed to be configured that way. There were like hacks of the US government, and calling them hacks is not even really actually the right term, right? Because these buckets are just wide open. They're pointed out to the internet, and accidentally stumbling upon them and looking through them, I don't know.
Like
You can
walking
argue
up
in
to
a
somebody's
legal sense.
computer when they have their Facebook page open and saying you got hacked.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like it's a hack because legally speaking, it falls under the hacking laws, but it's not
Illegal
a hack.
access.
Yeah, it's people that don't know how to configure things or forget to lock their computer are getting taken for a ride. But anyway, so S3 buckets wide open, hilarious. And we talked a lot about just encryption and things like that. So I had a really good time at that training. And a couple of shows ago, and I'll have to find your name again, but you had suggested that we deep dive into some security topics, if that would be interesting to you. That is extremely interesting to me. So we created ourselves, if you heard in the intro, an all-new security corner where I guess we can all kind of do this, but I think security is more my thing than anybody else. So I imagine there'll just be more excuse for me to talk more. But yeah, we're going to talk about DNS over HTTPS this week, and we'll see how that goes. I think everybody should do it, but I want to duke it out with anybody that doesn't want this to become mainstream. I want to chat with you about it, especially those of you sitting in the chairs across the internet from me that we'll hear from in just a sec. But anyway, security training, that was mostly what I did. Bo, you trained too. What did you train on?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of similar. It was a IPS appliance, an intrusion prevention security appliance, or I can't remember what the S stands for now. Intrusion prevention system appliance.
Yeah.
But the interesting part for me was it was running on FreeBSD, so I kind of had a lot of FreeBSD crash coursing while I was there, and that was a lot of fun. I've never touched FreeBSD. I've listened to the Jupiter Broadcasting FreeBSD podcast like once in my entire life, and then decided I didn't know what the heck they were talking about, so I quit listening to it. I may have to pick it back up because it looks like it might be something that I'm gonna have to learn to work with. But so far, it seems really cool. Most of what I wanted to bring up was just traveling to France for the training was something really cool. I got to meet a lot of my coworkers who I've been working with online. I got to meet them in person at the French office for the company I work for, and also just kind of seeing a different place and a different culture. I got to see a lot of historical places in Paris, and it was just an awesome trip. And like you, I really enjoy sort of the training process and getting to geek out with the trainer and my coworkers and things like that. So yeah, I hope they send me to more trainings, and even in France, that'd be great.
So on that IPS, did it have a name, or was it you were just building BSD?
No, it was basically like a proprietary system for this particular manufacturing process.
Interesting, because I've trained on Sophos equipment and Palo Alto equipment, but yeah, I don't think either of those are based off BSD. So interesting.
Yeah, those actually were mentioned a lot, so that must be the popular brands there.
Well, one of the things that Palo Alto came out with first was so we're talking about DNS over HTTPS this week, and one of the things that Palo Alto did was they figured out how to break HTTPS, and I guess they didn't really figure out how to break it. That was already a hack. That was already something that hackers had been doing, but they figured out how to make a hack, an actual literal hack, into a feature that they charge you $1,000 for. So I'm not really a fan of these ETMs because of the stuff that they do. But then again, I mean, it's legitimizing hacking in kind of a weird way. Cool.
So, Tony, what have you been doing this week?
I helped if I put my mic on. For the last show, I was away on vacation. Just got back a week ago today. Had a great time travelling around Iceland and visiting the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, which was brilliant. One of the problems I had while I was away was I couldn't access any content that was on archive.org from my mobile 4G provider. And it turns out the mobile ISP was blocking archive.org as an adult site. Don't know why, but that's what they feel it is. So it meant I couldn't download the podcast. I couldn't download any HPR shows, anything that was, using archive.org as a host. Since I got home, I was chatting with Josh last Monday, and he suggested a VPN called Proxy Master. Stuck that on my mobile, and it works like a dream. So when I'm out and about on 4G data, I can now access archive.org and any content that's stored there. So that solved that one. I've also installed Debian 10 Buster onto one of my laptops, the Toshiba Z30. That's going to be my distro for Distro Hoppers this month. So far I'm liking it. I was listening to a bit of Big Daddy Linux Live earlier on, and they were testing out Debian, so 10 Buster, and there was various comments which I'll keep to myself for now. But I agreed with some of them and disagreed with others. But so far it's looking okay.
Oh man, I want to hear these opinions.
I'll do them on the private Discord channel because I don't want to spoil it for the listeners.
Okay.
We have a show to do,
We have a show. And also, I managed to acquire Raspberry Pi 4, and I've been playing around with that. And so far, I quite like it. Got it set up here on the big TV that I've got. I had the peripherals I needed, although I did have to modify the little HDMI to micro HDMI converter I had, because the power connector and the HDMI port is the first one to use. if you're using a converter, there's not a lot of space. So I had to do a bit of on-the-go modification on that, but managed to get it so it worked. But if you're going to have two power supplies, two monitors plugged in, then you will need to get the full HDMI to micro HDMI lead, because otherwise you won't be able to plug two in, because there won't be enough space to do it. But yeah, I like it, and so far it's looking like a good piece of kit, and it's definitely getting on that way that you can use it as a day-to-day PC for light use. I've accessed Drive and typed up some of my show notes on it and things like that. So yeah, I'm quite impressed with it. But I'm going to have a play with it a lot more over the next couple of months, and might even use it as the computer to test what do you call it? Raspberry, and maybe do Raspberry as distro hoppers for August. So we'll see about that. But that's about it for me. Apart from watching England win the World Cup in cricket today, everything's fine with the world. So I'll hand over to Moss.
Hi, my name is Moss, and I'm a distroholic.
Hi, Moss.
Hi.
Hi, Moss.
I installed OpenMandriva LX4 with a very tiny level of success. When I set displays to use my external monitor, it freezes up. I've reported the bug to the OM4 team. I also reported a bug to the Calamaris team for one which displayed in both installs of OM4 and Farron OS, where it literally, if you're trying to use Calamaris to automatically install onto a partition that you already have in use, it does reformat that partition, but it also creates an identical imaginary partition and tries to write your distro to both. And that's a mess. It can be worked around just by going to manual partitioning, but it's supposed to work right, and it did after they fixed a little thing in OpenMandriva 3. Anyhow, I attempted to load OpenSUSE 15.1 Leap as a live disk, but it just wanted to install. I looked at the installer and it tried to do some things I didn't want it to and offered some issues I didn't even get, so I aborted. It might be easy to install on a computer by itself, but without evaluating it a lot more, I don't recommend it. Tony Hughes and I are going experimental in this month's Distro Hoppers Digest. Instead of just encapsulating our ratings and presenting the review as such, we'll be talking our way through each step, including successes and frustrations that we took during installation. My review is on the current Farron OS version, which just got an update on July 13th. So stay tuned to Distro Hoppers Digest. We will bring you only the best. Speaking of which, after a lot of issues, some related to the Calamaris bug, I reinstalled Farron OS with a lot of help from the developer, who, as I understand it, is only a couple years older than Josh. I'm still curious as to whether it is a distinct distro, as it takes Linux Mint Cinnamon and mostly just adds a lot of theming stuff. But if it weren't distinct from Linux Mint, I would not have had so many problems getting this far. I've been beating my head repeatedly against any available wall in using the theming in this distro, whereas a few years ago it only took a simple pair of mouse clicks to change the theme. Farron OS Next, the new version coming up, or maybe a separate version, uses Plasma 5, and I'll have to check that out. I helped a coworker who was trying to edit her resume. It looked good on her phone, but WordPad totally messed it up visually. I helped her install SoftMaker FreeOffice 2018, and everything was fine. I was amazed at how good Windows 10 has gotten at hiding essential things from users, such as how to reassign file types to programs. I got a VGA cable to attach my wife's new Hitachi 26-inch TV to her T430. The specs for the TV are amazing and the price was right, but the PC doesn't recognize it beyond 1024 by 768, leaving me to wonder whether her PC needs a BIOS update. I spent some time getting advice on how to fix it, but nothing has worked yet. We just bought adapters so we can use HDMI cables. Should fix the issue arriving Wednesday.
Hey Moss, on that one, I think the issue is not your computer; it's the TV. The TV is not giving Linux the spec correctly, so it doesn't add it to the X-Randor output. That's really
Which is
the
why
issue
I'm
there.
trying the HDMI cables next.
Oh, sure. Yep, that's probably gonna fix it because I had a monitor that was doing the same thing, and when I swapped from DVI-D to what was it, DisplayPort? Yes.
Yeah.
It just worked after that.
Yeah, we need to get DisplayPort adapters to go to HDMI. And they're on the way. They'll be here Wednesday. I managed to sell, or rather give away with a small exchange of money, some of my old computer equipment. I only attempted to boot one of them and it did not turn on, but I sold that one with its killer video cards and 2 others, all seemingly non-working, and threw in a bunch of other stuff. So this kid plugs in the first 2 computers and they booted fine, including my old Dell, which stopped booting almost 4 years ago. I would like to say I'm not crying a lot about essentially giving away hundreds of dollars of equipment just because it didn't work for me, but that would not be true. I am using the money to buy a Lenovo IdeaPad 110 with an AMD A6 chip for the price of a new Pinebook. And our listener, Jackie Moore, donated what I needed to get over the top without being asked. Blessings on our listeners. I still have 2 old computers left, the Linux box and the Hackintosh, in identical boxes. And now that I know the stuff works, I'm not going to let them go so cheaply. We received a couple support letters for my wife's immigration case, still have a lot of work to do, and my health insurance just canceled my ability to use the local health clinic and assigned me to one 24 miles away, despite the fact that there is a clinic in the same system walking distance from me. I think I'm changing insurance providers. And no matter how hard you try, you won't get me to talk about cat litter. Josh, what's up with you?
Yeah, so I have a few things to cover because I wasn't here last week. So the first thing is I recorded my first impressions video of the PyTop 4, which is a new product from PyTop, and it's on Kickstarter at the minute. It's actually, I think it took them 4 hours to get $80,000 or something like that, which was fully funded. So that was good. It's quite a cool solution compared to the Kano, I think it's Kano starter kit, which is the same price. It's good value because in the Kano starter kit, you only get like a Raspberry Pi 2, where this is like the 4GB Raspberry Pi 4. So it's quite good value there. I've put the link in the show notes if you want to find out more about that. The audio is quite bad on the video, but I bought a new microphone to fix that for the next one. The reason I wasn't here last week is because I was in London at JP Morgan. I was nominated for the ARM Young Coder of the Year. So ARM, the computer company, chose me as their gold winner of the Young Coder of the Year, which I didn't expect, so that was quite a nice surprise. And to add to the excitement, I also won the Student of the Year, which is the overall kind of student out of everyone, which was quite nice, as it wasn't chosen by a company that is direct in the technology world like ARM is, but it was rather chosen by a bank, which was quite nice to see. And out of that, I won a Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Yoga, which is similar to the X1 Carbon, which is a laptop I've wanted for years. So that was really nice as well. On to the more exciting things. I got a new Raspberry Pi 4, the 4GB model. It took me 20 minutes after it was released to order it because I'm slightly impatient. But anyway, it arrived the day after, which was very good. Pimoroni, who I ordered it from, are just an hour and a half away from me, so that's quite handy with delivery times. So the Raspberry Pi 4 is actually quite a nice upgrade from the last Raspberry Pi, the 3B, no, yeah, the 3B Plus. So the Raspberry Pi 3 has been in a few different revisions. You've had the original 3, the 3B Plus, and then the 3A Plus, and now they've released the Pi 4, which was quite unexpected. So, just a quick overview of what the Pi 4 looks like. You've got a new Broadcom chip, which is a 64-bit chip, so that's quite nice. It has an updated GPU, if I remember correctly. The Wi-Fi chip is the same, except it now has Bluetooth 5.0. It still has the same 40-pin header, still micro SD, but there are a few changes that they've made to the bottom of the board. So you now have USB-C for power. It did originally have micro B, which kind of makes sense to upgrade it to USB-C, because that's what everyone is using now.
We've got news about that later.
Oh yeah, that has caused some controversial opinions this week, but I'll save that for the news later. So you got USB-C, so not only is it great because everyone has USB-C now, it's also great because you can get more power. You now have 2 micro HDMI instead of a full-size HDMI, so finally you can use dual displays, which is really nice. You still got the camera and display connectors and the 3.5 headphone jack. You now have 2 USB 3 ports. I'm not sure why they kept the USB 2, but maybe that's just a cost-saving thing, but that's quite a nice addition. And we now finally have Gigabit Ethernet over PCIe Express rather than the really weird USB Ethernet hub thing that they had on previous models. And that's quite nice. So I decided, I had this mad idea, why not replace my lovely desktop PC, which has lots of high performance components in, and replace it with a Raspberry Pi 4, because it has desktop performance apparently. So that's what I did. Leo named it the Desktop Pi Challenge. I tweeted about it. So the hardware is nice. It's really fast compared to the 3B Plus. However, the software runs Debian Buster, which is now actually released. But at the time it was released the Raspbian Buster was released a few weeks before Debian was. So it was quite weird with some packages, but I think that's fixed now. The software is quite buggy. It seems half done. A lot of things aren't supported, but I think that's just a time thing. Hopefully that will change. Obviously, because the Raspberry Pi 4 is so new, it might take a while to get up to scratch with the previous models. But the thing is with the Pi 4 is you've now got 4 gigs of LPDDR4 RAM. So it's quite desktop performance wise. It has similar specs to my phone, which is the Pixel 3. So it's more mobile performance than desktop, but it is definitely usable as a desktop PC for entry level users, not really high performance users. So the RAM's nice. It makes it run really fast. So Chromium runs really fast and is really usable. LibreOffice, which is included on the operating system, is really fast and usable. I was able to use it for about 4 days until I decided that people wanted me to do some work, and when I went to install Adobe Creative Cloud, it didn't want Wine to run, so I couldn't actually run it on the Pi 4, which was a bit of a problem. So I used it about 50-50 from then on. But the dual displays allows you to get some work done, and the faster chip and RAM is really nice for using it as a desktop PC. It's definitely more usable than the Pi 3B Plus. In terms of price, I think it's quite good for the speed. Obviously, it's a desktop computer, which is for entry-level users. So $54 isn't bad for something like that. They have kept the original $35 price point for the 1 GB model. I wouldn't really recommend going for that. If you want kind of like desktop performance, go for 2. But if you want the really high performance, go for 4. So the specs are more comparable to a mobile than desktop. I've already said that, but just wanted to reiterate that they are more mobile specs than desktop specs, but it's usable at the same time. The only problem is you can imagine with the heavy load and the more performance that you've got, cooling will be an issue. I think Tony touched on it before, that you kind of really do need a fan. Pimoroni did a blog post on the best cooling solutions, and it showed that using a heatsink makes about a 2-degree difference, but a fan makes a good 20-degree difference. I got a Arctic Cooling USB fan, which when I set up a little Python script to map the temperature on a graph, it dropped the temperature by about 20 degrees C, which was really nice. So do get a fan. They are quite cheap. Pimoroni have made quite a nice add-on called the Fan Shim, which just goes on the 40-pin header, and it goes at the bottom, and it just cools the CPU. So that does a similar job. I think I might pick one of those up. But all in all, the Pi 4, I'm really happy with it. As a desktop entry-level computer, it's definitely usable, and I think it's a step in the right direction for Raspberry Pi.
Josh,
yeah.
Have you run into the problems with the USB-C? Apparently Raspberry Pi did not follow the specs.
Yeah, so for me, I think this might be quite controversial. I think people just need to not worry about it too much. I think obviously the media can get quite involved with this sort of stuff. But it's not really much of an issue because it's only a very small minority of USB chargers. The problem is that you've got these like smart USB chargers. I think they're called USB-C E chargers or something like that. And they're detecting the Raspberry Pi as an audio peripheral rather than a device to charge. So I've not actually run into the issue yet, but I know some people have. So I'm yet to replicate that, but hopefully they'll fix that on a later design.
Yeah, the chargers are really just ones that like ship with laptops.
Yeah,
because the laptops will have to negotiate how much power they want and all that kind of fun stuff. And the Raspberry Pi doesn't give enough information to really negotiate that, so it just fails down to nothing. But we'll have some more specs on that. But I had a comment and a question. So my question is, so on dual display. So on a single display, Raspberry Pi will give you 1080p at 60 frames or 60 hertz. When you go to dual display, it goes to 1080p at 30 hertz. Can you feel that? Like, I mean, it's just one of those things you have to like really pay attention to see. But did you notice it?
So it's actually not 1080p; it's 4K that happens.
Okay. So I read that wrong.
So the what happens is because there's timing issues, you have one display at 60 hertz 4K, and then another display at 4K 30. 1080p, as far as I can see on mine, it runs them both at 60. But I think they will once they get some of those timings fine-tuned. I think they are planning to make them both run at 60. But I imagine you could notice a difference. But on mine, they were both the same because I'm only running 1080p.
I'll come in here, Josh. When I was running the Raspberry Pi on Saturday at the Jam, I was playing a video on YouTube, and I'd also downloaded a video and I was playing it locally, and it was struggling to play 2 videos on the machine natively. And that was at less than 1080p. So I've got doubts whether it can run 2 4K monitors. Have you
a lot of
actually
that
had
might-
it running? Have you actually had it running
So-
on two 4K monitors?
So I've not actually had it running on two 4K monitors, but I think the issue is that the new one uses. Don't quote me on this, but I think the problem is that it's running. The new Pi 4 is using H.265 encoding, and the YouTube's playing H.264 because they've got a browser extension on Chromium. So I think that's why YouTube videos on their own, when nothing else is open, are really bad on the Raspberry Pi 4. I think that's just
I agree with
a
that.
browser issue. But I think we have to kind of realize that it is only still a low power, low spec computer. Hopefully, I know some people have had video playing better than you described, but I'm not sure how they did that. I'll have to
Right.
look into it.
Okay, my other thing is I want to know how winning 2 national awards and a £1,600 laptop is less exciting than the Pi 4.
Well, yeah. So that was kind of it was kind of really unexpected to do that. I went in thinking, oh, I was going to win nothing, because they at the award ceremony they actually flashed up an image of me, by mistake, and I thought, oh well, they'll announce bronze, silver, and gold in order. So I was going in fully expecting, oh, I've won bronze, but no, I ended up winning a £1,600 laptop, which is more than what I thought I was getting, because the model that they said I was originally getting, they seemed to upgrade it. So yeah, I'm quite excited for that, because I've never actually really had a new laptop. I've only ever bought secondhand. So yeah, hopefully next week I'll have something to report back on. Hopefully,
Congratulations, man.
thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. I had one last comment on the cooling needed thing on the Pi.
Yeah.
It's not just that you need cooling; it's that the Pi will actually throttle once it hits like 72C or whatever the upper
Oh
threshold
yeah,
is.
I had.
It will scale back.
Yeah, I had it sitting at 68 degrees idle just on a Chrome tab, without
Ooh,
cooling.
wow.
So I mean, they did originally have some issues where they had to release a new firmware because it was something to do with the USB 3 was overheating or something like that, and that's what was causing
the
some
USB
issues.
3
Well,
controller, was
Yeah.
Will it
overheating
run
everything
full
else.
Chrome? You did say it was 64-bit. Will it run full modern
So
Chrome?
this is the interesting thing. So the operating system Raspbian is only running at 32-bit for some reason. They haven't released a 64-bit version of it.
That's to make it backwardly compatible with
Yeah,
the previous
yeah.
versions.
I think really what they should do is just release a separate image for the Pi 4 if they want to keep that backwards compatibility, because you're kind of having all these devices out there now, with the Pi 4 that aren't being used to the full potential. I think that's a shame.
I think that's probably going to come in the future, but I think they wanted to just get an image out that was suitable for all the Pis, but because it's a big piece of work to totally
Well,
create a new image.
the 3B Plus was 64-bit if I remember. But yeah, hopefully they'll work on that. But no, it just runs the standard Chromium at the minute.
Yeah.
Do y'all see what happens when we let someone talk about a pie? It just turns into a pie show.
It does. Just to say, I've stuck a link in my comments to the fan shim, so there's a link in the notes for that as well.
Cool, check that out because it seems quite nice. I haven't got one yet, but hope to soon.
Cool.
All right, and Joe, what do you got for us? You've been reading?
Yeah, well, I say reading. Mostly it's, listening. So all of these are in audio. I was rereading the Dragon Knight series, which I read as a kid, and the last book came out in, I think, 2000. It's by Gordon R. Dixon. And the audiobook is very well done. I highly recommend the series, and I really enjoyed going back and listening to it all again. And that's 9 books total. So if you're looking for a slightly longer series, that's one that I would recommend. And I also gave The Amber Cycle a try by Roger Zelazny. And this is, well, according to Moss, this is his most commercially successful series. And I cannot recommend these audiobooks. The audio quality is very bad. It was recorded in the 90s by the author, and you can, even on the digital version, you're getting that tape hiss. And I listened to everything at like 3x, and I turned the speed down on this to like 2.4, 2.5. And maybe it's just a bit too convoluted as well. The books are fairly short. I think they're 6 hours total, which means I'm doing them usually in 2.5 to 2 hours. But it's just not been an enjoyable read. And I'm going to have to find hard copies and give that another try and see if it comes off better.
Find some other books by Zelazny. He's a wonderful writer, just not in Amber.
Yeah, I will definitely look at some of his other works and see how good they are. But hopefully a bit more audio production would be nice. And I'm thinking about starting a section either on this show or spinning off another podcast for just audio listening in general. Audiobooks, audio dramas, podcasts, and that I would recommend for others. But I'm not sure if I want to do that. I know a lot of other people have given it a try, and it rarely makes it past like 10 or 15 episodes just because, eventually you stop listening for a little while, or you want to go through your old classics again, but you don't want to, rehash that in a podcast format. So it would be extremely difficult to keep up for any amount of time, but it's something I've been bouncing around in my head for a really long time now. Maybe just also include reviews for different headsets.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, like, if you, I don't know, whatever you like doing, once you turn it into a job, it's just one of those things you have to consider how it's going to affect you, and especially if it's like a time commitment, like 2 hours for one book that you would review over a podcast or something like that. You got to find time to do that, and then when you have to put other things off to force yourself to enjoy something so you can review it right is, I don't know, it's just a huge commitment. So one of those things that's just hard to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know about the return on investment on that. Just the time basis. Would I actually get anything out of it? Or would anybody else get anything out of it? I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a try and just see what happens. Also, me and my wife are looking for new cell phones, probably. I mean, we're still running the Galaxy S7, and it's getting old. The batteries aren't lasting as long as they used to. My 3.5 millimeter jack has gone out. The wife has already had a replacement phone on insurance on warranty on that one, because she had severe screen burn in. And so we're debating what phones we would like to get. We were looking at the S10s because I think you can still get them, buy one, get another $900 off, but it's still an insane amount to pay for a phone. And I have been looking at the OnePlus line to see if we might be interested in anything there, but it's a tough call. Or we could wait for the new Note and see what happens there, but that's going to be even more expensive than the S10s. And a lot of the rumors say that they're not going to have a 3.5 millimeter jack at all, and I really like having a 3.5 millimeter jack. And Moss, you were saying something about the X4? Moss?
We lost Moss, but I
Right.
mean, just a comment on that. Yeah, I mean, this is what you're talking about. $900 for a phone. This is totally the reason why I run the phones that I do.
Well,
Outside of being
hello?
a security
Hey,
phone.
now we can hear you.
There you go.
I was talking all along. I'm saying X4s. Moto has decided not to make an X5. You can get a refurbished or a new X4 for as cheap as $120, and it's almost a flagship level phone.
Cool. Well, I've also
Very
heard
nice.
good things about the Pixel 3a.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all stuff that I'm definitely going to look into. I mean, the only reason I really want the S10 is because of the DeX capability, the actual ability to have a Linux operating system just by hooking up a monitor and keyboard. But once again, I still don't think it's worth that price for that feature. And I don't know if I can get it anywhere else. If there's a large expansion in the future on something like Maru OS, then I'd be good to go.
Yeah, so
I got to. Go ahead, Josh.
the 3A, Android Q, the new version of Android, is going to have a desktop environment. Apparently, that's one of the features in the beta right now. So the 3A will eventually have that.
Yeah, a buddy of mine has that phone, and it's a pretty solid phone to be priced at what it's priced at. I got to play with a OnePlus while I was in France. One of my coworkers at the French office had a OnePlus. I think it was the OnePlus 6, maybe. I don't know. I'm not up on their numbering, but it was a solid phone. I mean, I've used Samsungs for the past several years, and the OnePlus felt pretty smooth, felt pretty nice.
Hmm. Okay, yeah. Well, I haven't been hands-on with a OnePlus at all, which was one of the reasons that, I'm not jumping on it. And the price has been climbing over the years. I've kept an eye on that, but it's also because they've added functionality. So you can't complain too much about that. But moving on from cell phone woes, um, I have been also with the wife enjoying the new Swamp Thing from DC Streaming. It's doing really well as a horror show, and all of DC Streaming's shows so far I have greatly enjoyed. So, if you're thinking about adding one more streaming service, I recommend that one. They also have a fairly good backlog of movies and DC TV shows.
I didn't realize the Swamp Thing show was out yet. I was just
Yeah,
watching a teaser for that in anticipation, so I'm missing
yeah.
out.
Yeah, it's well, they're doing weekly releases instead of, making it so you can binge it all at once right away.
Yeah, I prefer the
So,
weekly release.
yeah, it's every Thursday right now.
Man, I'm gonna have to get you to come on the next ECN radio so we can talk about Swamp Thing.
Okay, okay. Well, if you get a chance to watch it, I will definitely discuss it with you.
I will do it.
Okay. Oh, and I picked up some new tech. Nothing overly exciting, but I picked up an Echo Input, which is, the Amazon's new Echo device, and it's interesting. I mean, you hook up your own speaker to it instead of it having a built-in speaker, which means that, if you have a high-quality Bluetooth speaker or aux speaker sitting around, you can hook it up to there and it'll sound great. Um, I got it on sale. I believe even now it's on sale for $15. And I do have a question for you guys in just a second, but I will get to that because I also picked up two Smart Life bulb sockets, which are Amazon compatible Yes, and I'm refusing to use the other word as much as possible unless I slip. Amazon compatible bulb sockets. So you screw that into your light socket, and then you screw a bulb into it, and it works like any other Wi-Fi connected device. Just got them before the show. Just got the one set up and ready to go. I still got to set up the other one. It was a bit of a pain to set up, but now that it is, it's working great. I'll let you know if it dies in the next couple of weeks or anything like that, but I'm going to have it set up on a timer out in the garage. And because, I have a lot of electronics equipment out there, and have the lights controlled that way and turn off automatically as soon as I leave for work, and just see if I can reduce the amount of electricity I use during the summer, because I don't know about anybody else, but the electrical costs are insane in the Dallas area.
Texas is hot.
Yeah. Well, when you're using air conditioning that much, I guess it would be, but between $300 and $400 a month for electricity.
Well, I find that it costs me less to air condition my house during the summer than to heat it during the winter. About half.
Oh, what type of heating do you have?
A heat pump?
Gas?
Nope, it's all electric.
Yeah.
The heat pump, air conditioner, heat, same thing.
Yeah, it's actually cheaper, at least for us, to do gas for heating in the winter. Yeah.
Well, I would tell you to talk to your little device and say hello to your NSA handler for me.
Whatever.
Yeah.
They can't catch me typing. That's all I'm going to say. And,
my tinfoil hat shimmers every time any of those things kind of come up.
Right.
We've unplugged both of ours.
And, I have one in my bedroom as well to control the lights in there. But I think I'm also going to hook up another smart socket out in the garage and just have that turn off and on my monitors, my two giant monitors out there, and that should save me quite a bit of electricity if those are shut off just while I'm at work. And I'm thinking the input's not actually going to go there. I'm going to swap the input out for one of the dots that I have, the one in the bedroom. And my wife had an idea for a project, and we have an old clock, and she wants me to take out the face of that and put the input in that hole. I'll have to do some cutting and some reconfiguring because the hole's actually bigger. So I'm going to have to get a piece of wood and make 2 holes in it and set it up there. And probably put the Bluetooth speaker inside the clock. And just, it will be helpful because we currently have the dot set up on one side of the bedroom, and sometimes it doesn't hear me. But if we put it in the clock face, then we're going to hang it up over the top of the bed, and it should be able to hear us both better then. And that's all I have.
Cool. I had a couple of comments. So to finish off. Oh,
my question.
Oh, go for it.
I almost forgot my question. Are you guys planning on getting anything or have any plans for Prime Day, which is, tomorrow as of the time of this recording?
I do. I want to get a water cooling all-in-one water cooling cooler. If they come down, I found a nice NZXT one because my CPU cooler is really loud, and I'm hoping to sort that out by picking up a deal tomorrow. But that's
I was
going
to suggest the NZXT. I switched from a Cool Ants to NZXT, and Cool Ants at the time was the more expensive product, but the NZXT actually has performed better.
Well, I support the Amazon workers' strike and will not participate.
Well, I also mention it because, like the first year Prime Day was really good, and there were some really awesome deals there, and plenty of stuff that everybody wanted to buy. But since that first year, I've mostly haven't seen anything worth jumping on for Prime Day. I think I bought one item last year.
At the risk of sounding, I don't know, getting too off into the weeds, really, I feel like that's Amazon's MO, though, isn't it? They entice you in with the cheap prices and then they jack them up so that you don't realize that you're paying an extra 50 cents for everything.
Jeff
But,
Bezos wants to save all his money for his space program.
Hey, man, he's got to get to Mars, okay?
Him and Elon are in a race.
Yeah. But I had to finish off the idea that I had on the phone thing that I was talking about. Me and my wife kind of do it in a weird way. So I'm more of a PC guy, and she's more of a mobile gal. So I'll allow her. I mean, like she'll go out and get whatever she wants on the phone side, and then when she's done with it, when she's ready for a new one, I'll inherit whatever she had, and then she'll get the new stuff. And then I'm the same with the PC because she does a lot of desktop stuff. So I'll go out and buy the coolest stuff that I can get my hands on PC wise, within reason, I guess. And like I have a Ryzen 1700 now, and that's what she'll inherit soon because the Ryzen 3700 is out. I'm so excited.
Well, we tend to do the buy one get ones from Samsung, so we get phones at the same time. But it's usually a really good deal. But in this case, because I would want probably the S10 Plus because I'm me. And that's like a $1,600 phone, and no.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and I mean the math kind of works out that way though. Like, if we were to have done a buy one get one or whatever, because I don't really actually have any reason to upgrade my phone other than my wife's done with it, so she's giving it to me, so we can sell the bottom of the barrel one, and then we can all move up one. So money-wise, I think it all kind of shakes out just fine. But yeah, I don't get the newest of the new on the mobile side.
We almost never sell our old phones. They all get handed down one more person.
Well, what's funny about that is I'm doing that now. So my daughter, who is like 3, who has no idea about any of this stuff, unless I can find some other use for it, is going to inherit a Intel Xeon 1230 V2 and a Radeon R something 270, something like that. So like she'll be able to play Fortnite crazy, but not like she can actually play Fortnite.
Yeah, well, my daughters also have a tendency to break phones. So currently, my middle child has my old Note 3, and my eldest had my S3. But no longer. I think she's got the wife's old Samsung Galaxy Avant. So, yeah, we make phones last a really long time. So sometimes
that's
it is
good to
worth that
hear.
investment.
Yeah, it really is, because I mean, you spend that much money, and as long as it lasts you for like 6 to 8 years, I mean, that's a pretty decent investment.
Yeah. Well, we've had the S7s now since like release day, so 3+ years. Can't complain too much about that on a flagship.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is the last of what I have.
All right, so we'll head on to the news. So in this fortnight's news, we have a lot of stuff, actually. First up, we have the Linux Mint June's monthly news. And every month, Clem comes out and lets us know the state of the union. And the union is strong, or something like that, right? So we got quite a few things. Have you guys taken a look at any of the new stuff that's coming down?
Nope.
You're just here for the surprise, huh?
Yeah, I like surprises.
Well, let me surprise you. So the last show we talked about Joey from OMG Ubuntu talking about how it's going to be just kind of a mundane release. And I mean, not mundane, I guess, really in a bad way, but I kind of read it that way. Maybe that was just me. But anyway, it's not. It is not a mundane release at all. It's not just bug fixes at all. So let's dive in. So the first set of stuff that Clem's talking about is the idea of pinning an item in a folder. And so this is one of those things that's gonna be Cinnamon only. I don't know if Mate is gonna get it. I don't know if XFCE is gonna get it. But I had mentioned last show, this is why you want to use Cinnamon. I had a reason for that. And then so here's reason number 2. You can pin items in Nemo, and what this means is that when you open a folder that has 6 gajillion files in it, and the file that you want starts with a P, you got to scroll, 60% of the way down that entire folder, or do searching or whatever. What if you could just pin it to the top of that folder? Well, now you can. That's the idea. You just pin it to the top. Easy peasy. And then that file or that folder will be at the top, regardless of what letter it starts with, or if it starts with a number or whatever. It will just be at the top. So if you use it all the time...
What if you didn't file your files by alpha? You have other ways to organize your files.
Exactly. This is totally it, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how you deal with your file name. Just pin it. Pin it.
This is like the modern version of putting an underscore at the beginning of the folder name. Like this
Oh my God, right?
Yeah. It's so that you can pin it to the top as you would, similar to like social media. You can pin, a particular blog post if it's so relevant that, people that visit your site may need to see it more often than they see the previous blog post. So it's similar to that, something you use frequently. Yeah.
Exactly.
I like it. I dig it.
Good. Me too. See, this is why I love using Cinnamon, man. And I even make a mention of it later on, that this is one of the big reasons I love sticking on Cinnamon.
If it ends up really useful, it'll end up on, all the desktops.
Watch. I guarantee it. So if you're using the terminal, you're still going to have to stick an underscore at the front of those things. But in Nemo, pinned up at the top, nice. Then we have this other thing, and oh wow. So this is something that you can actually do in Windows already. Sort of. You can make those context menus. So when you right click on a file, there is if you right click on a JPEG or whatever, Clem had mentioned inside of there that you can set as wallpaper. What if you could make it do anything that you wanted to with a script? So any script that you have already created that is, say I wanted to, and another one of the things that Clem had mentioned was convert audio from DTS to AC3. What if you could just right click on an audio file and click that, and then out pops an AC3 file or a video or anything? What if you wanted to convert JPEG to PNG? What if you wanted to convert PNG to TIFF or any of that kind of stuff? If you can script it, you can create what he's calling a conditional menu that will allow you to just, right click on a file and make it go. No popping open a terminal, no running a script. Yes, this is, oh my gosh, man. So there's just a lot of times where I have to dump down into a terminal and do stuff when I'm just like, it could be easier. He's done it. He's made it easier. So, by the way, all this stuff is coming in 19.2, so it's not here yet, but we're beta testing now. So if you're brave enough, you can open up that beta channel and get some of this. So the next thing is the Cinnamon menu will now make it apparent what version of the generally named apps you're running. So what this means is, so let's say you go out and you install gedit, and then you install gedit through Flatpak. So when you open up the menu, it doesn't actually tell you which is which. It just says gedit on both. Well, I guess it's kind of a bad example because gedit would show up as text editor, but it works for that as well. So let's say you had 2 text editors, gedit and Zed, and in the Mint menu, it just shows up as 2 text editors. And so it's like a roulette wheel, which one you're going to get. Well, now the text editor actually says in parentheses over to the right, gedit and Zed. So you know exactly which one you're getting when you click on it. But further than that, if you install gedit on Flatpak, it would also show you the Flatpak version of the app that you're using. So there's no more confusion in the menu as to which one you're going to click on. So this is just a nice little quality of life addition that kind of made my life kind of weird, because I like to install a bunch of different software.
I could see another use case, like if, say, for example, you play Final Fantasy 14, as I'm sure nobody on this podcast spends too much time doing that. If you install it using Steam, and you also install it using Lutris, and then you respectively use both to create a menu item, it's hard to distinguish which one is which. But this giving you a more qualified name, would be really helpful.
Yep, it just saves you pain, and I love it. So another cool little quality of life thing is the scroll bar settings. So in the right-hand side of every Cinnamon window, you have a scroll bar. Well, now you can hide it. Easy, right? Nothing too exciting, but I don't know, if you like having those clean, no muss, no fuss, like outside areas, right? You just want it to be nothing but clean. This is just a way to do that. And Mintbox 3. This is something that we had kind of hinted at on the last show. They're going to be beefy. There's going to be a price to match that, but these things are going to be utter powerhouses of devices. So here, give me just one sec, and I can tell you exactly what kind of specs. But I know that the lesser expensive one is going to have a 6-core i5 in it, 16 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD, Wi-Fi, and a bunch of front-facing ports. The expensive one is going to be come with an i9. I think that's the Ocho core, the Octo core, whatever it is. I don't quote me on that. It doesn't say, so I'm not positive. But also ships with a GTX 1660 Ti, 32 gigs of RAM, a terabyte SSD, Wi-Fi, and that same front-facing, all those front-facing modules. If you go look at the picture, you'll see what I'm talking about that front-facing thing. Everything is just right there. And these boxes are tiny. So, well, tiny is as tiny as you can get a huge powerhouse of a machine. So just really, really nice. And if you haven't realized yet, pretty much people will just pile on to things that Clem says. So Clem has a section right down here that's talking about snaps that I have this feeling that people are going to pile on, if they haven't already. And it's really just Clem's ideas on where Snap is going. And I gotta say, I agree with him to a point. So let's kind of get into the weeds of what he's talking about. So he says that he's worried about Snap cornering the market, and that in and of itself isn't a bad thing, because options, right? Like, you have options. But he uses the example of Spotify. Imagine a world where you are Fedora. You run Fedora all day, every day. How do you install Spotify? And there is no way for you to install Spotify using just the stuff that Fedora gives you, as far as I know. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But there's no RPM, right? You probably have to go in and add some kind of crazy third-party repository to make it work. So on the Ubuntu side, you can install the deb. And this allows you to sidestep pretty much any kind of snap anything. But he kind of posits a question. What happens if Spotify stops rolling a deb? Then your only option is Snap. And it is their prerogative. They can do what they want. And but where does that leave the Fedora users, right? They have to install Snapd. You do not get a choice if that's kind of the situation they're in right now. You don't really get a choice on how to install Spotify officially. I'm sure there are third-party ways to do it, but officially. So he kind of takes this onto the next step, because this is not hypothetical. The Spotify thing was hypothetical. This is not hypothetical. Ubuntu is considering putting Chromium as a Snap-only installer. So what this means is you'll still be able to apt install Chromium, but that will change from installing it from your typical app repository to installing it, or it's turning into basically just a pointer to Snap. So when you apt install Chromium, and just imagine, if you will, if you do this in Mint, apt install Chromium, it will only be available to you in Snapd. So in Linux Mint, we don't get Snapd by default. I install it because I'm not too worried about it, but the idea that it will install Snap behind your back, that might be the way that they implement this. Because in Ubuntu, right, Snap is already installed. What is going to happen when Snap is not installed? Does it come back and tell you that, oh, now you have to install Snap? Or does it just install Snap for you? I don't know. I would suspect that it would just install Snap for you, because, I mean, they're trying to make it easy, right? So it's just one of those things that you lose out on choice. And then he posits the next question: what happens if, to install a Snap, you have to have an Ubuntu One account? Now, this is hypothetical again, but what happens if they wall garden it? Where are we at in a free kind of way? Where are we? Do y'all have any comments or anything about those things?
Snap's open source at the moment, isn't it?
Right, and the thing that he's getting at is that it'll still be open source, but what if they put an Ubuntu One account before you can install Snaps?
But what I'm saying is, if it's open source, surely another distro could take it and recompile it as their own version of what would be a Snap, and set it up that everyone can use it. Other than, if the Ubuntu community want to wall garden the official Snaps, they could, in the same way as Firefox, these different versions of Firefox using the same code, but they just don't call them Firefox. Surely
True.
we could do that with Snaps.
But I imagine I guess if you're really buzzed about security, then you will go out and seek this kind of thing out. But what does it mean for regular users? And do they even care?
I'm not sure.
Right, and to be honest with you, I don't think they care. I really don't think that someone that installed Linux Mint because they're tired of Windows, I don't think they care. But
That's probably true.
Yeah, but for people like me, and obviously people like Clem, we care. I kind of don't want random stuff on my machine that I didn't say that I wanted on my machine in a roundabout kind of way,
What I would suspect is that it would warn you that it was going to install these additional things with just a wire and in for yes or no, and most people would not even read it and just hit Y.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into the whole, do they even care? And if you don't care enough to read what's happening on your system, then you don't. And you, not in a bad way, right? Not necessarily. I'm not picking at you. I'm just saying that I don't think you care enough, that's fine. You can care as much as you want to care. But I guess I don't know. I'm a weirdo. I like to read all those messages. I like to know what's going on. And so I would probably hit no. My tinfoil hat will shine a little bit more, and I'll say maybe not. Thankfully, there's still a dev for Spotify, but Chromium may not be that way. And I do have Chromium installed on my machine. So actually, that brings up a good point. What happens to me on my Linux Mint machines that have Chromium installed after this
You quit getting
switch?
updates.
So do you think Ubuntu would allow that?
Yeah. If you want the next version, you have to install the Snap version, so you just quit receiving updates.
Yeah.
Right. But does it come up with a message and say, hey, Chromium, the way that Chromium is installed is changing. Do you want to accept Snapd being installed on your machine? Does that happen?
Don't know.
Yeah. So my issue is not really with it happening. It's how they're going to present it and how they're going to force you or not to do it. But
coming back to the tinfoil hat approach, though, surely this kind of it kind of relates to the issue with IBM and Red Hat and the Fedora community. When IBM took over Red Hat, there was a lot of worry that Fedora was going to suddenly either disappear or, become something that the Fedora community were, they were going to have problems with, because IBM might think, well, it's not economic for us to create something that we're not making any money out of. And surely this is the same with snapd. Surely it's what would the mileage be with Canonical saying, snapd suddenly going to become this thing that's behind a walled garden? Because a lot of the development is still community development, and then they're cutting their own throats, aren't they?
I suspect you're right, actually. I don't think they would do this, but it's just a question that Clem posited, and I figured we'd take it there. But yeah, I really
Think
agree
of
with
all
you on
those
that one.
people using Dev1 that will not be able to use Chromium anymore.
Right, and that goes on. I imagine Clem installed Flatpak natively in Linux Mint for the same reason that we have LNDE, right? Just as a not really where I want things to go overall. So let's just go this way with it. So yeah, more of an escape hatch to something like that. Yeah, definitely. So we'll kind of see where this goes. I don't think Ubuntu One is going to do whatever Ubuntu One is going to do, or putting it in front of Snap or anything like that. But it does make me wonder about apps like Spotify. If they ever drop Deb, how's that going to work? How are you going to get it, and will it be official or whatnot? So we'll just have to wait and see about all of that.
Is Ubuntu One still a thing? I thought Canonical had killed Ubuntu One anyway.
Well, I think it was more of I think you're right, but I think it's more of if Ubuntu decides to do a walled garden approach, they might resurrect it and use it for something like that. But I don't know. I'll have to look into the Ubuntu One thing, whether or not it still really exists or not.
Okay.
So the last couple of things on this was that Linux Mint 20, there will be no 32-bit version. Oh no! Does that affect anybody here?
Nope.
Yeah. No. So we're all on 64-bit, I think. You've got to be a pretty staunch holdout to still be installing 32-bit versions of anything. But nobody forgot about you, because Linux Mint 19 is going to be supported until 2023. And in my opinion, it was inevitable. It's a lot of work to put a 32-bit version of an entire operating system out there. And I really feel like this is something that the Mint crew had to do to really refocus their efforts on where Linux Mint is gonna be, rather than where Linux Mint was, or the holdouts, right? So I think this is a good thing. What do you guys think about the 32-bit drop?
It is inevitable. I mean, you're always going to have people that are going to complain about that as well, because they are using older hardware and only can use a 32-bit system. I know that there's still a couple of older tablets that I have that will only load a 32-bit version, but eventually I'm just going to have to use whatever is still available or find an old version. So,
Debian!
Yeah.
But I thought everyone was still using 16-bit Windows.
Well, I mean, not on purpose.
I've got to say, even if you're using 10-year-old hardware, most of it supports the 64-bit these days.
Right.
AMD introduced single-core 64-bit before Intel introduced the 64-bit dual-core.
Oh, the Athlon.
Yeah.
And I still have a couple of devices that have 64-bit processors but use 32-bit UEFIs. But that's easier and easier to get around all the time.
Yeah, I think the big issue is going to be on ARM with 32-bit and 64-bit ARM. But even that's starting to become less of an issue.
Yeah, really, really. But I think it's a separate thing, the 32-bit 64 over there. It's a totally separate thing. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just one of those things that it's time. It's time. All right, so let me see. Oh man, keep getting knocked out of my.
Pick up the slack, Leo.
I know. Speaking of Slack, nice segue. So the last thing that we have on this list that Clem let us know was that there is a Slack channel for media. We kind of mentioned this the last time that we were in it, and so if you're part of the media, if you report on anything, go join that Slack, because this is going to be horse's mouth kind of thing. So you don't get the weird opinionated stuff. But here's my opinion. Hopefully, this will combat some of those clickbait articles, but if it generates money, they're still going to make them. So I really don't think it's gonna change anything overall, but it'll be an easy way for people to be like, nah, that's BS. Look at what he really said, as opposed to just having a blog post or something like that. You can actually have real conversation and really get to the root of, especially if Clem types something that might be seen as controversial, you can clarify. It's not another 30 days before you figure out what was really meant or something like that. So overall, it's good, but I'm cynical. I don't think it's going to help the clickbait articles much. All right.
Yeah, you don't see a whole lot going on in that Slack right now. Hopefully, it starts picking up a bit more.
But are there a lot of pointed questions toward Clem on that?
There isn't much right now. Matter of fact, I can still see the post from a couple of weeks ago about about our podcast. So I'm really hoping that it does pick up. I'm interested in things that could be happening there, but we'll see.
That just sounds like,
and it gives
to
us
me,
another place to advertise our podcast.
Well, true, but I think overall that just sounds to me like we just need to go poke the bear.
Probably.
Yeah, let's go poke the bear.
Well, have you signed up yet? I see Rob in there. I see Moss and myself.
I will get in there this week. There was a link, right?
Yeah.
It's in your mintCast email.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, I'm gonna go click that later. That's awesome. I will go join because I want to poke the bear too. All right, next up in our news, Ubuntu rolling out experimental ZFS in 19.10. So, who uses ZFS?
Right now, nobody running Ubuntu.
I think we've just pissed off everybody that uses FreeNAS. They're like, yeah, I use ZFS.
Okay, and I know BSD Now got mentioned earlier in the podcast. I'm going to bring it up again because I actually do listen to them, and they talk a lot about ZFS and setting up ZFS and upcoming changes to ZFS. So if you're interested, go back and listen to some of their old episodes in regards to ZFS.
Yeah, it's totally worth the listen. Does Alan Jude still do that show?
I think so.
Yeah, man, he's sharp. I like him. And then,
we have to leave it to our Canadians to do the good stuff.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, so the idea with this ZFS thing was that there was a proposal in Ubuntu that they add ZFS as an option during install. So we'll have to wait and see if it comes out in 19.10 or not. And I'll certainly be playing with it because great. I think it's just the more options we have, the better.
Yeah, I've installed ZFS before, and I think I've set up like one pool, but the amount of hard drives I'm running, it's not really worth it to have a ZFS set up. If I were running like a high-end server or something, then that would be a different story. But my use case doesn't include ZFS.
ZFS really protects against things like bit rot and just errors on disk. So, if you're not really worried about that kind of thing, I don't think ZFS is going to be any better than anything else. And in my use case, I can't afford the disks the RAM too. Yeah, because you got to have like 1 gig per terabyte of storage, and I can't afford that. So my solution was to buy good NAS hard drives and back them up to crappy USB Seagate pieces of trash. But I still have a backup, and I can still recover in case something goes wrong. But yeah, I don't know. There's only a small bit of data that I have that I can't lose, and that's backed up in 3 places. Because
Right.
in my security classes, always mention that backups equals backups minus 1. That's how many backups you have. So if you have 2 backups, I'm sorry, what is it? Something like data equals backups minus 1 or something like that. So if you only have 1 backup, you have 0 backups because it's when something goes wrong. What is it? Is it Moore's law? The one where something will go wrong? It'll always go wrong. Yeah, it'll
No,
always
that's
go wrong.
no, Moore's law is about the changing over time of
Oh,
chips, the
Murphy.
doubling of speeds. You're thinking Murphy's law.
Yeah, Murphy's law. So yeah, because
Anything
it'll
that
always go
can go
wrong.
wrong will go wrong.
And that's just from working and seeing it actually happen in front of my eyeballs. And I'm
Murphy
like,
was an optimist.
Yeah. Why does this tape not work? Ah! And yeah, anyway, so that was not fun. So yeah, backups equals backups minus 1. And then Risk 5 gets a dedicated graphics dev. So
Right
Risk
on.
5 is
Keith
is
Packard.
cool. So it's moving forward. Moss, do you know much about that?
Yeah, Keith Packard joined the RISC-V company Sci5. This is Keith Packard. He was the longest still active ex-Windows system developer. He worked on the open source Linux graphics driver stack before working for HP Labs, and also had a side gig for Valve improving the Linux stack for VR. And he announced on July 1st on his blog that he's now working full-time at Sci5. Going to be working on RISC-V based processors and other tasks while he's parting ways with HP Labs.
Very cool. Well, we've already talked about the Raspberry Pi 4 thing, but just to reiterate, they tried to do something clever. They tried to add 1 resistor where 2 was required. And the one really piece of thing that I wanted to get out there was that it's really not that big of a deal if you're buying the Raspberry Pi USB-C charger or whatever. But yeah, it'll fail down if you use some of the more expensive ones. But here's the deal. If the Raspberry Pi hardware devs would have gone exactly to the USB spec, this would not have happened. So I don't think it was anything malicious, but oversight that just kind of cost them. So it's going to take a new board revision. This is not a firmware update fix. So you'll need a new Raspberry Pi 4 if you want to actually fix this. But I think, like Josh said, it's not really going to affect many people. It's if you're just trying to slap any old USB-C thing, you might run into this.
Yeah, like it costs $7 for the official USB-C lead. So really, it's not
Right?
that much if you need to buy
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I went ahead and bought one. It was 10 for me, but I guess that's the difference between pounds and dollars. Yeah, it was $10 for me, and I just have it, and I don't ever have to worry about this. So if I buy one and I get the old revision, I don't care. It's fine. It'll work. And then let me see. OpenSUSE plans name change. Starts a foundation. Uh-oh. So is this a good thing or what?
Oh, I guess that's me.
You keep dumping them in there.
Well, I can't help it. It's one of those compulsion type things. The OpenSUSE project is going on, but SUSE is getting more commercial, and OpenSUSE is deciding that they just have too much going on to get donations on their own, so they're starting a foundation, and to start the foundation without having complete control by SUSE, which is
Did we lose him or did we lose me?
Oh man, I thought it was me.
I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm not here.
We
You
couldn't hear you
weren't.
for a bit there. You cut out in the mid
How
sentence.
come I keep cutting out?
You
Yeah.
have this. You got my bug from last show.
Yeah, well, anyhow, they've been talking about it in very non-controversial tones. There is no consensus, and they are also talking about changing the logo.
I like that little lizard. I don't want them to change that. All right. Well, We'll kind of see where that one goes. But one great thing that affects Linux Mint is Ubuntu offers latest NVIDIA drivers to LTS users. So that means that you'll get the latest NVIDIA drivers on install. It'll stay up to date, and anybody installing Linux Mint also benefits from this. So if you're on Team Green, tisk tisk, then this means that you'll not have to do any kind of weird PPA, any kind of weird script. It just works. I love it.
It's not
Maybe.
open source.
Maybe
well,
it just works.
If you're using Team Green, you don't care about open source. You never cared about open source because Nouveau sucks.
Okay, yes.
Nonetheless, a lot of people have been commenting on how much love is being given to NVIDIA for all this from all these various Linux companies, whereas AMD has been open source this whole time and they sort of get pushed off to the side.
Yeah, they shouldn't get pushed off to the side. AMD should be what you're buying, especially
Now-
if you've just taken a...
No.
Well, listen.
If you want to have this argument of like the last 10 years of graphics
I didn't say they were
cards...
I didn't say they were more performant.
They weren't even close until this year. And
Absolutely.
then this year, they're like knocking it out of the park
Yep.
with their new graphics cards. So now
With their new
is the time.
processors, too.
Yeah,
Yes.
the new processors too. Yeah.
I just want to say this. AMD is like a boxer getting into the MMA ring and still beating up on everybody, right? Because AMD has historically always been a CPU manufacturer. They kind of got into the GPU game and did okay, but all of a sudden they are hitting way above their weight class in both categories because Intel has been dominating, NVIDIA has been dominating, and now both of those companies are having a good run for their money because AMD is just dancing all over these companies. It's amazing, and I'm so glad that I've been Team Red for this while, right? Like I'm a glutton for the punishment, but now I finally get rewarded for it. Yes. So excited.
Didn't AMD used to be green?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, actually, their little arrow icon used to be green. Now it's just Team Red. Everybody jump on the Team Red boat. We are about to blast off. Last thing that we have on here is a new GPD P2 Max 8.9-inch Ultrabook. Who's buying one of these?
I wish I was buying one of these.
Not me.
I put in a link to the YouTube video for Linus Tech Tip, and he does a really good job covering this. And he's covered a bunch of the GPD products, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with these, but like the GPD Pocket, the GPD Win, the GPD Win 2, the GPD Pocket 2, all great little tiny handheld devices. Now, I really like the GPD Pocket 2 because it's like the size of a cell phone, but it's a full computer, and it's reviewed well. I'd love to get one. I'm not spending $500 on one. Hopefully the price comes down one day. But this new device is slightly larger at an 8.9-inch screen, and it really brings back that whole netbook feel to it. And it's got some insane stats for an 8.9-inch Ultrabook. It's got two USB 3.0 slots and a USB-C slot. And it's running the high-end one is running the M3 8100Y processor, which scores like 3,500 points on Passmark. And you can get the either 8 gigabyte or 16 gigabyte RAM version of that. And it's just a really good-looking device. And I would love to own one, but I probably never will, because by the time I can afford it, it will be old technology.
Yeah, well, I started watching the video, and about halfway through, he'd already said everything there was to say. He was just bubbling like a fanboy about the device, and there was still half the video to go. I just gave up. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, I like the video, and he does talk about the trackpad not being the best, but the keyboard being really good. So it's definitely something that I would like, and it's that size kind of, between a cell phone size and a laptop size. And I don't know if I would carry it around as much as I would if, say, the GPD Pocket 2, if I could get a hold of one. But it would definitely be something that I would like to get hands-on with for a while.
The older I get, the more I need a bigger keyboard and a bigger screen, and so I'm no longer a fan of this, but 10 years ago I would have been all over this kind of device.
Yeah, just that
Definitely.
$700 price tag kind of kills it for me.
Yeah, how much was the original EPC anyhow? I know we
But,
bought a bunch of 701s and some 901s for the homeless people in Asheville, so it couldn't have been too much.
right. Well, I didn't have the triple EPC. I had Acer Aspire 1, and that was relatively close to launch date, but I didn't get it new, and I know I paid $270 for it.
So it's a great
Yeah,
device, great specs, and not a great price.
right. And I don't see the prices dropping on the older ones. I didn't see a price drop on the GPD Pocket when the GPD Pocket 2 came out, so I don't know. Maybe they just retain their value.
Maybe there's just not enough of them in the market for them to lose market value.
Right. Could be that
Definitely.
too.
Well, a quick correction on the AMD stuff. So there is still a binary blob loaded on boot, but I'm still Team Red. I'm still feeling it. All right, let me see. Where are we at? Oh, it's security time. So let's head on to the security update.
This episode has been hacked.
No. So, security update time. So, over the past couple of weeks, Firefox has added some really cool tech. DNS over HTTPS. I've heard it on a bunch of different podcasts, and I am all on board with this, to be honest. So this is just so DNS over HTTPS, regardless of the Firefox stuff, is a way to encrypt DNS requests, and this has been something that has been so due over time because we went from HTTP to HTTPS quite a while ago, years ago, and I mean there were definitely the security type blue teamers that were really worried about this because it was it's gonna obfuscate everything. No one's gonna be able to see anything. And then I mentioned to Bo earlier, the Palo Alto boxes can kind of break this, but it's not easy to do. Now DNS has finally caught up and is using TLS in the background as well. So the thing with this is, so the overall idea of this is that it's going to obfuscate your DNS requests for anywhere that you go from people like your ISP. So the same people that you would be combating with a VPN are the same people that are gonna get helped by DNS over HTTPS when they cannot use a VPN. However, your threat model is still kind of weird because you have to choose some other company to trust. Same as with a VPN, right? I mean, if you're using a VPN and you're trusting, I don't know, private internet access or NordVPN or somebody like that, you're trusting them with your data. So same with DNS over HTTPS. It is obfuscated from prying eyes, but you're still trusting whatever company it is that you choose in the options of Firefox. Yeah, your endpoint. You still have to trust that group. So, but the good thing though is that like ISPs can't hijack your DNS and do weird stuff with it, and that's really where I was concerned about DNS stuff. And it's clear text, so anybody listening on the wire can see where you're going and when you go there.
Right, right. With HTTPS, yes, your actual web page is encrypted. Everything you get from there is encrypted, but the DNS request is still unencrypted unless you're using this.
Right, exactly. So I think this is a good thing. I think everybody should use it, but I also think that you need to do some research on the company that you're going to be trusting with your DNS, right? So, I mean, just like with your ISP, they could look at your DNS logs. So too can any company running a DNS over HTTPS node for you. But you can run it yourself as well, which it's still unencrypted at a certain point. Somebody has to make a typical. If you're running it yourself, you still have to make a typical DNS request, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll just see how this kind of goes. But that's the idea. You're encrypting DNS, and the ISPA over in the UK got their panties in a bunch about this and named Firefox the villain of the internet or something like that. And then they retracted that. They didn't realize how, I guess, passionate internet people are about encryption. But anyway. So as a privacy hawk, I kind of think that everybody should use this, but you should look into who you're trusting. So the way that you turn this on is go into Firefox. I think every browser has the ability to do this. I think some of that might be in beta, so you'll just have to check with your own browser. I use Firefox, so I wrote it up for Firefox. So in the preferences of Firefox, go to that little 3 dashes menu, preferences, and then down at the bottom of the screen you get an enable DNS over HTTPS. So by default, that's Cloudflare. I think we as a internet culture are pretty trusting of Cloudflare overall. They sit in front of a lot of websites preventing DOS attacks, DDoS attacks. So I think we're already trusting them with a lot of the internet stuff in the first place, but I think there are a lot of DNS over HTTPS groups. So I don't have a list in front of me, but I want to say that Google runs their own, that Quad9 is running their own, OpenDNS, all those guys are probably going to end up running their own if they aren't already. But yeah, this is kind of the idea. You want to encrypt everything that you do from here on out. So my last little point on this is, do not make the mistake of thinking that putting DNS over HTTPS on is going to fully anonymize you. It will not. That is not how this works. It will anonymize, or it will encrypt, not anonymize. It will encrypt your DNS requests. But if you've never been to a website that's running HTTPS before, then you have to realize that during the initial handshake where you negotiate the encryption and you download the certificate, that happens in clear text. You don't have the key yet. You don't have the certificate yet. So you cannot encrypt between you and that server. So a couple of the back and forths are still in clear text. And guess what that means? Anybody that's listening on the wire that is watching this, and there's not many people doing this, don't worry too much, but anybody that can listen on the wire can still see where you are going. So DNS over HTTPS is a great step in a great direction, but it is not the full-on anonymization thing that I've kind of heard a couple of people kind of tout it as. It does not fully protect you for, prevent you from showing people where you're going. So be careful with that. Don't take this as the end-all be-all, but it's a great step in the right direction. So that's it for the security break, and we'll move on to our Linux innards. So in this section, we're talking desktop environments, what we like, what we don't like, and why. So first off, we kind of want to define what a window manager is versus what a desktop environment is, and from a quick definition style Wikipedia Google, you're looking at a desktop environment provides you with all of the tooling that you might expect a full operating system to have, and a window manager is just about making your windows be where you want them to be and where you expect them to be, and they don't give you Notepad or they don't give you gedit or anything like that. You are meant to put that together. So there's a bit of a difference between a DE and a window manager, and that's pretty much what it is. Surely there's more nuance to it than that, but that's the high level view of it.
But these days, don't just about every desktop just throw in LibreOffice and say, okay, we're not going to develop our own office?
Well, right, yeah, that's the whole point of a DE, but a window manager wouldn't make that choice for you, I think is really kind of the point.
Well, in the old days, the desktop environment would actually have their own office. We had GNOME Office, we had KDE Office, etc., etc. Now everyone's just tacking in LibreOffice and They figure that's all the tools we need.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, each DE can kind of make their own choices on whatever they want to. But yeah, that does move them over toward the DE side.
That's not strictly true, though, is it? Because depending on what your distro is, the desktop environment doesn't necessarily control what software that's installed. That's more to do with the distro maintainers, because you can get two different distros with Cinnamon or Mate, and they'll have a totally different set of software with that particular distro that's shipping that desktop environment.
Right. If you take one of the other versions of Linux Mint or other versions of Ubuntu and install Cinnamon and then just load up Cinnamon, it's going to work differently.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into what our favorite DEs are, what our least favorite DEs are. So first up, we have obviously Cinnamon. So Joe, you're up at the top. So tell me about what you think about Cinnamon.
No, I enjoy Cinnamon. It's on pretty much all of the computers that I use. I enjoy it because of the simplicity. It's very set it and forget it. I can brand new install, not have to make any changes. It works just fine, and I leave it there. And I kind of rarely see the desktop anyway, and it Cinnamon looks very modern to me, and it's while still being very similar at the same time. It's what I've been used to my entire computing career. And I like how it's set up out of the box. I also like the fact, and I know that a lot more are getting this as well these days, but it has super key searching built in, which means that you hit the super key or the Windows key or whatever you want to call it and start typing, and it will find your application. And it was one of the earlier desktop environments on Linux Mint to get that and to have it just work after install. So that is one of my go-to items for a desktop environment, is that works out of the box without me having to add any other applications to set it up. Bo, what's your opinion on Cinnamon?
I wanted to say that Mate was always my go-to desktop environment, and recently we discussed Cinnamon and its development in a salacious headlined article several episodes ago, and it actually encouraged me to, after reading that article, I wanted to try out Cinnamon Edition just because I'd been using Mate, and even before Mate, I was using XFCE. So I really hadn't touched Cinnamon since it was brand new, and I haven't changed. I've been sticking to Cinnamon ever since we did that story, and I really enjoy it. I just wanted to kind of say that I'm glad that I gave it another look, and it feels way more modern and less buggy now than it did back then. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ran into any like bugs or issues. It's just been pretty modern to be such a lightweight DE. That's what I like about it.
Very cool. And then I don't know. I've been a Cinnamon user for quite a while, so I guess it really, I don't know. It's really kind of ingrained itself into my head. So I'm a bit biased, I guess. But I mean, the fact that it works in Mint the way that it kind of works like Plasma in KDE Neon is one of the biggest reasons I like it. I mean, anytime, during the point updates, right? So I mean, you get 19 and then 19.1 and then 19.2. There's always something new to get used to, or to learn, or to realize that it has stopped being so hard to do X or so hard to do Y. It just, every single time I look up at one of those Linux Mint updates, I'm like, oh man, that's going to make my life so much easier. And the fact that that happens is one of the biggest reasons that I use Mint. And I mean, it's pretty lightweight overall. It's certainly not the most lightweight, but it's got a minimal amount of kind of like eye candy, right? I mean, the windows fade away, things slide in and out. That is really all that I need. I don't need a huge KDE. I guess kind of getting into Plasma, right? Plasma has all the eye candy. Has like all of the stretching and the moving and the sliding and the whatever. So I mean that's a bit on the too much side for me, which is why I think I kind of prefer Cinnamon over anything else. It's struck a nice balance of look good and be functional all at the same time. And so I know there's some stability stuff we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but I've never really had any issues. I remember maybe a few years ago they added in by default a restart Cinnamon shortcut add-on thing that you could add to your taskbar because Cinnamon broke all the time. I've never had to use it. I've never had to actually think, oh, maybe I should put that somewhere on my taskbar because I guess it's just never broken on me. Maybe I've been really, really lucky, but yeah, I've just not had a whole lot of problems with it. So I think a mixture of I haven't had issues with it, so I haven't really had to think about it too much is why I'm on Cinnamon. So yeah, just a nice, simplistic, middle of the road desktop environment is where I'm at.
I do want to mention that it's also touchscreen friendly after some tweaking. I forgot to mention that in my section. So once you kind of on smaller screens, you'll need to expand the bottom bar, but that's about it, and it works great with a touchscreen.
Hey, Debbie Downer here. It crashes too often, and when I report that it crashes, I get attacked. Not my use, not my case. It's either me or my hardware that's got the problem. And the other thing I've noticed is that when I'm moving open programs to other workspaces, it takes several more mouse clicks than in Mate or XFCE.
Yeah, I'll come in here. I've not really used Cinnamon an awful lot because originally when I got into Linux, it was because I was refurbishing or using older hardware to add limited resources. And because of the extra RAM headspace that Cinnamon uses, it's always kept me from kind of using it on a regular basis. But maybe I need to relook at it now that I've got systems and laptops that don't really suffer from lack of RAM and lack of power. But so far, I've not really played with it an awful lot.
Yeah, I've been playing with it in Farron OS, which is all based on Cinnamon, and it seems to make everything that Farron's trying to do more difficult to do. But I'm still playing with I still have Distro Hopper's Digest to do, and we'll get into all of that.
So, Joe.
All right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say move on to the next section, which is going to be Mate, I think.
Yeah, just in time. Alan Pope had mentioned it in the YouTube stream. So let's talk about his baby.
Oh, okay. Well, I do use Mate quite a bit. And now, I am going to say that it doesn't look quite as good as Cinnamon, but it still looks good. I like it better for lightweight systems and remote desktops. So all of my systems have Mate installed, even if Cinnamon is the primary that I use on them, because with X2Go, I can set the desktop environment I want to use, and I found that for remote access, Mate just works better than Cinnamon. Now, I used to use LXDE and LXQT for this, but Mate has that super key search built in that works really well. At least it does on Mint. I don't know about other systems, but I can just hit that super key and start searching for whichever application that I want without having to do any extra work to get it working. Boss?
Moss, we lost you again.
Okay, let's go to Tony and come back to Moss.
Hi, I'm here. Well, Moss was commenting that this is his go-to desktop environment, but As Moss, I'm the same. Mate is my go-to desktop environment. I've been using it since Ubuntu went over to Unity, and I moved to Mint as my main distro. It's got all the tools I need. It's familiar. It was very familiar. Kind of the desktop paradigm was very familiar to me, so I didn't want to go over to the Unity paradigm, and it's kept up with that over the years, and it's compatible with all the software I use. So I don't have any problems with Mate. I feel and it's fairly low resource use. Usually, once you switch off a couple of things that start up at boot, you can generally get it down to around 600 mega RAM on booting, which is pretty good these days for the hardware we've got and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a great piece of kit, and I love it.
Am I here?
You are now.
Oh,
Hey!
apparently Mumble was hijacking my mute button, and I couldn't get my mic turned on. Anyhow, yeah, Mate is my go-to desktop. It works. It looks similar enough to Win 7, which is where I came over at. There are a lot of quirks getting to Cinnamon, and I've not had any issues with Mate. The rumor is that when GNOME 3 came out and everyone hated it, Mate forked GNOME 2 in the best way and has since converted to GTK3 Plus tools. Cinnamon took the new GNOME 3 and tried to fork it backwards to resemble GNOME 2. So Mate looks forward from a revered past, while Cinnamon looks backward from a convoluted future.
Okay, that's a good way to describe it.
Well,
Mic
I want
drop.
to. I want to be explicit in that because Mate doesn't actually look like that in anything other than Mint, right? Because Mate kind of has that same GNOME 2 look if you install it just stock on another OS, and that's the way it comes in Ubuntu Mate as well, right?
Yeah, well, I just installed Debian 10, and there are a few differences with the implementation of Mate in Debian 10 than there are in Mint. For a start, you don't have the search function in Debian, which the Linux Mint devs seem to have implemented in the Mate desktop and the menu and etc. So yeah, there are a few tweaks that are different, and the layout of the menu system slightly different in other iterations of Mate.
Yeah, I think we kind of skew it toward the way that Linux Mint presents it. So I mean, I'm kind of the same way though. I kind of got used to the fact that the menu is there the way that it is.
Yeah, it's one of the things that kind of cheesed me off a bit about the Debian interpretation of it.
And Bo, what do you think about it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm loving my cinnamon challenge that I got going on right now. That's a new. I didn't think about the whole cinnamon challenge thing on YouTube. I like but Mate is my go-to. That's what I usually install. And it's Linux Mint Mate Edition, or Ubuntu Mate is great. I think that I was so used to GNOME 2 and that paradigm that even though I don't use the default GNOME 2 looking layout, I changed some things, but I still think that I'm just comfortable in that DE compared to most others.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a history with Mate. Actually, it was for a few years. In the YouTube chat, we were talking about Unity, and we don't actually have it on this list, but it's not really a dead project or anything like that. But it's not at the forefront like it used to be. But when Unity came out, I think I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember that Mate is what saved me from. At the time, I didn't like Unity, and I think everybody kind of has the same thing where Unity, once Unity's gone, everybody's like, no, don't go. But before, everybody was like, no, please go. But anyway, Mate is what saved me, because Ubuntu for the longest time was running on GNOME 2, and that whole paradigm is what I got used to. And when I found that Mate was giving that back to me, yeah, pretty much I formatted everything and put Mate back all over everything. And I stuck with it for the longest time. It was fantastic. So anyway, so I found Mint and kind of moved over to Mint and started using Cinnamon, and kind of forgot where I had come from. And then so I would try. Well, actually, one of the things that I do is I push Mate to anybody that's running it in a VM for Linux Mint. And when I put it on real hardware, and this might just be the Linux Mint implementation of it, but every time I scroll, I get, and this is on a few different monitors, there's a, like, screen tearing is really, really bad in it. And that's actually the only reason that I've been pushed away from Mate on the Linux Mint side, is that I get screen tearing. And it's actually not unfixable. You just have to change the compositor. But it's been so long, I can't remember if I went from Compton to Compiz or from Compiz to Compton. I can't remember, but anyway, I had to make a tweak, and it was just kind of a pain to find where that tweak was. But after that, it was perfectly fine, perfectly usable. So as a good second choice, I mean, yeah, Mate was my first choice for a long time until I found Cinnamon, and then yeah, it's still got a special place in my heart, I think. But really good overall. So next up we have XFCE, and yeah, Bo, tell me about what you got for this.
The XFCE. XFCE used to be my only DE. I loved it so much. I feel like it feels a bit dated nowadays, and I haven't used it in quite some time, so I don't know how it's improved. But I used to run Archbang, and Archbang comes with OpenBox. But obviously you can install anything you wanted to after that. And there was a section on the Archbang forums where people would post their layouts and their cool conky configs and all this kind of stuff. And I would always find an XFCE layout that I liked, and I would steal their creativity and just copy and paste all their settings into mine. And that was the go-to forever. But for me, at least, it's heavily been replaced by either Cinnamon or Mate. It just, to me, does not feel as modern as those do.
Yeah, XFCE's kind of made the rounds on the podcasts over the past couple of months, and that's kind of the general consensus, right? And I feel the same way.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about how customizable it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is I think that what I loved about it at the time was how customizable it was. But it was a ton of work to get there. Whereas a lot of Mate and Cinnamon are just closer to what I'm used to by default. I don't have to change as many things. There was a time where I loved changing those things. Like, it was almost the hobby of running Linux for me, was actually just setting all that stuff up and doing that. That was the fun part. But not anymore. I want to get there. I want to get there a lot faster and not make a hobby of just rearranging my DE all day.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe I always said I'll never get to the point where I don't want to do that kind of stuff anymore. And then I'm at that point now, and I'm like, what do I do, man? So XFCE for me and again, this is kind of come from the Linux Mint point of view. But it started to get to the point where now I have trouble deciding whether or not I want to go with XFCE or Mate, because I'm really looking for, when I recommend one of those over Cinnamon, I'm looking for the lightest weight one, the one
right.
that it kind of makes it look the most like Windows, and they're pretty close now. But I think XFCE, I haven't checked in the past little bit, but I think it edges out Mate as far as RAM usage goes. So as far as recommendation, I think I'm starting to go XFCE a little more often, but it's missing a lot of the features that the other two have. So
right.
it won't be my daily driver, but yeah, it's still up there as far as recommendation wise, especially in the VM for me.
This is an opinion show, right?
Of course. Well, this is an opinion section anyway.
Well, in my opinion, it's stiff and ugly. You can modify it in a number of ways to make it look less ugly, but it remains stiff. Taskbars can be made to run on top or left, but in most configs you can't get them to right or bottom. And there are those of us who like our taskbars on the bottom.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I just find it too pared down for me. And like Bo's just said, I'd rather just be able to work with the desktop environment and not have to do a load of configuration once I've installed it. So unless I'm installing something that's really low resource hardware, which it's reasonably good for that, although it's not that much better than Mate as far as the amount of resources it uses on first boot, clean install. So, but yeah, it may be marginally better for older hardware than Mate, or definitely than Cinnamon. But no, not for me for a daily driver. As I was going to say, as Zeb says on Big Daddy Linux, next.
I meant to point out that the vanilla installation of the three DEs that we've mentioned so far, I think XFCE's just vanilla installation is definitely the most dated looking out of the three, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let's move on.
Yeah, on to Plasma.
Plasma it is.
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it, Moss.
Plasma is everything you dream about in a desktop environment, except they're still trying to make it work. They've been trying to make it work longer than any desktop environment except GNOME. When they succeed, it's a truly beautiful thing. They've dumped more than a few of their applications more recently. And if you ever want to see an update manager fail, run Discover. It fails a lot less than it did a year ago, but still. Bo?
Yeah, I actually think KDE is pretty polished nowadays. I think it looks pretty good, just the basic install. I have done Linux Mint installations and then installed KDE on top of it. As a matter of fact, I think we had a listener write in and ask us to do that, like in one of the earlier episodes we did after taking over the podcast. And so I definitely don't have a ton of hate for KDE. And it used to be a option for Linux Mint, but it was dropped. And I think the main thing that I'm most thankful for from the KDE project is the applications that they work on, because of course you can use those in other desktop environments. But yeah, I don't know. I would say I have a love-hate relationship with KDE. It's not the one I use on a daily basis, but it's mostly just because of preference, not because of anything that I particularly dislike about KDE Plasma.
Yeah, Plasma is one of those ones that I have to keep installing KDE Neon just so I can see where the Plasma development's at. I actually, if I had to drop Linux Mint in a hypothetical world, I would go to KDE Neon. That would definitely be where I would go. Because I was saying before, like I like a little bit of eye candy. I don't like a ton, but Plasma has all of it. You can go turn it off, but Plasma has this thing about there's a toggle for everything, like a toggle for everything. So it's a little overwhelming, I guess, to kind of get it all set up. But it doesn't take too terribly long if you know where stuff is. My favorite thing about it is that when you right-click on stuff in the taskbar or task menu thing, there's like an alternatives star. And like the moment I figured that out, it like blew my world right open because it can totally change the way that Plasma feels when you pick some of those alternatives. But it's like 99% of the way there for me. My only real nitpick is that I like a clock in the middle at the top of my screen. And for some reason, Plasma will, like when you put a clock right in the middle, it will shift that clock when things get added to the taskbar. And I mean, I totally understand it if you're adding stuff to the taskbar, but like if you launch like Discord or Mumble or something, there's the little app notification by the top right hand corner or bottom right hand corner, wherever your app notifiers are. And when that app notifier comes up, it shifts your clock over, and it just hurts me so much because like little nitpicky things, right? Like this is not anything that's super major, but it just burns me up. I'm like, I put you there. Go back. What are you doing? Don't move. So it just bugs the crap out of me. But to be honest with you, everything else about KDE, with the exception of Discover, because I agree with Moss, Discover like blows up. I don't know why, and I don't know any other software center that blows up as much as Discover does. I'm sure they've gotten it to a better point. I know that they've made a lot of fixes for it, but yeah, there is just something about Discover that blows up every now and then. So those couple of things are really kind of keep me away from KDE Neon or really Kubuntu as well. But man, as a backup plan, Plasma's so nice. So Tony, tell me about what you got for Plasma.
Well, I don't use KDE. I know it's a long time ago, but I'm still feeling the fear of the KDE 4 fiasco, and that kind of put me off ever installing KDE. And I've never really got over that, so I've never really played with it
you
at
gotta
all.
try it.
KDE 4 got better as it went along. It was just horrible when it came out.
I don't know. Plasma 4 didn't get the Unity treatment, right? I don't remember ever seeing a post where it was like KDE 4 Plasma is amazing and it's the best thing ever. But we're kind of like that's happening to Unity right now.
No, all the magazines I was reading at the time of KDE 4 were saying, nah, it's ruined, go over to GNOME.
Well, try looking at Trinity and see what KDE 3 was, and you can see why they had to change it.
Yeah, I've been GNOME or now Mate for so long. It's a difficult thing transitioning.
And one thing that was said in the YouTube comments is that when Discover crashes, file a bug. Every single time anything happens like that, you should file a bug. Or well, I mean, obviously, as long as that bug hasn't already been filed. But yeah, let them know. So, Josh, tell me about this Deepin thing. I've seen it. It's pretty, but I think you're the only one of us that's actually used it.
Not true, but go, Josh.
Okay.
Yeah, so in my opinion, it's probably the most user-friendly desktop environment to use because it's very Mac OS-like. So Deepin by itself is a desktop environment that you can actually install via a repository on Linux Mint and other Ubuntu-based operating systems. But Deepin does have its own operating system for the best experience, and I think, well, it's by far my favorite desktop environment. I'm currently using it on my Linux Mint install, and I've got the standalone operating system installed on my laptop. So yeah, it's definitely my favorite, just because it's probably the most user-friendly, and it looks nice as well, in my opinion, because you can find that a lot of Linux operating systems, new users shy away from them because they don't necessarily have the best desktop environments. So I think this is a really nice one to use for those sorts of users.
There are stories that there is work going on for an official Ubuntu Deepin flavor. My problem with Deepin OS is that they don't have a live disk version. You stick the USB in and your choices are to install it or forget about it. And also it's so heavily Debian. There's no PPAs, there's none of the flexibility. There have been rumors in the past which have been largely denied, although not unconfirmed, that the Chinese government has some hooks in the Deepin operating system.
I guess unless they're within the packages themselves, you don't have to use Deepin itself. You can just go get the DE using maybe Ubuntu or something like that. But yeah, no. So it's always a concern.
Well, I thought people had looked into that and they weren't sending any more information back to themselves than any other distro trying to collect information on what their users use.
Except that with Ubuntu, that it's an opt-in, opt-out type thing, whereas with Deepin, it was just there and they didn't tell anyone it was there.
Yeah, it's all about perception, I guess. It's one of those things. So LXDE/LXQT is kind of next up on the list, but Yeah, I don't know that we have a whole lot to say about it because it's like I don't know, it's very stripped down. So I don't use it at all, really. I mean, it's great for extremely lightweight installs, but I think I'm at the point now where if I have hardware that is so old that nothing but LXDE or LXQT will run on it, at that point, I have demoted it slash promoted it to just be a straight headless server. So, all the RAM that would be dedicated, all the RAM, like 200 megabytes of RAM, that would have been dedicated to a desktop environment or whatever is actually just dedicated to running a Snap or a Docker or something like that. So, yeah, I just kind of skip it most of the time. And this is not really anything bad about LXDE. It's more a commentary about myself and where I'm at with when I have RAM usage that low. But has anybody else actually used it in the past year or two?
No, it's been several years since I've used it.
Yeah, it gets an
So,
honorable mention here.
Yeah, I
I
don't feel.
looked at Lubuntu and I didn't bother installing it.
So Moss, I think. So speaking of the only one that actually ran it, Moss, I think this is true. You are the only one that's run Moksha, right?
I'm probably the only one here using Moksha or any other version of Enlightenment. My throat is going out on me. What's the matter? Anyhow, it's honestly a window manager, but it does more than any other window manager and gets really, really close to DE status. I wouldn't be running Bodhi OS if it weren't for Moksha as the desktop. The Enlightenment people themselves are conflicted on its status, but just like KDE, you don't want to run the update manager. It's called EepDater, and boy do you say Eep when you try and run it. Maybe someday it'll be good. I got into Moksha back doorway because back when everyone was trying Puppy, which is the most lightweight full operating system out there was a version called MacPup, which used the Enlightenment E17. And Moksha is a it's a fork of Enlightenment E17. They've had some issues lately because people using it are getting notices that they're not using the latest version of Enlightenment, and no one knows why those messages are coming out, but they're looking at it. This is just the last day or two.
All right. Well, that is it for all of our desktop environment / window manager / what we like our junk to look like stuff. So we'll hop down to the vibrations from the ether and talk about some of our feedback. All right, the first email that we got was from Todd to Moss. Moss, you want to take that one?
And it says, "Hello, Moss. You're probably already aware, but just in case, I was trying to get your podcast on my iPhone and through GPutter app, and I'm getting an error message. I like the freshness you all are adding to the mintCast. Thanks, Todrick." I replied to him, "A lot of systems around the world had interrupted service due to attacks on Cloudflare. Your difficulties may have come from those attacks. We hope you have better luck getting the download, and thanks for the comment."
Cool. I'm glad Todd's enjoying it. I have fun with it, and yeah, it's just great. It's great to hear that. Those are my favorite feedbacks, right? You're doing great! Yay! And then there's another one. Moss, I see your cursor there. Do you want to take that one as well?
Not particularly, but I will.
Okay.
Let's see. John Wallace writes, "Hello, I would like to be able to, quote, harden, end quote, my Linux Mint build, 19.1 Cinnamon. I would appreciate your guidance on how best to do that, including how to identify which settings can be disabled safely and how to do so. The kernel for my current build is 4.15.0-54-generic. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you and kind regards, John Wallace." And since I don't have a response for him, I hope somebody does, or we shouldn't have bothered to read the email.
No, I do. I have a couple.
Oh, good.
The first couple of things that you can do, and they're super simple. They really, really are. Is keep up to date. It's something that gets said all the time, but I think a lot of people kind of forget that little indicator up in the task area or whatever. You need to click it, and you need to click on update, because anytime there's a kernel update, there's bound to be a pile of security updates to go with it. So these are just things that like especially with zombie load and all of the other speculative execution type attacks, you probably are not going to get hit by this, probably. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't protect yourself. So those kinds of things come in kernel updates and firmware updates. So do them. And then as well, Linux Mint comes with a firewall installed by default. Turn it on. It is not on by default, but it is part of the welcome screen kind of steps that you go through, right? It's like do time shift, do your firewall, do your updates. That right there is a great starting point for how to do that. And in my opinion, I go with the firewall option of public. If I want my Linux Mint box to give up a Samba share or something like that, I will go in the firewall and enable it, as well as turn it on through the normal GUI options or whatever. And that goes for my portable machines. And especially for a security wonk, this is actually not a good thing to say, but on my local machines, on the machines that are in my LAN that never leave, like my desktops, I don't secure them as much. So I don't have the firewall running on my desktop, but I do on my laptop because of that reason, because more people are going to see me on a LAN with my laptop than they will on my desktop, right? My desktop doesn't typically leave the current network. So those two things, I think, are extremely important and are a good starting point for security stuff. So look into that. And John, if you have questions about how exactly to configure that kind of stuff, please let us know. Then next up we have Brian, and this one was to Joe, it looks like.
Well, it wasn't to me, but I did respond to it. Brian says, to me, it doesn't matter whether the show is in one piece or split. I think it depends on how one listens to podcasts. I only listen when I am in my home. I have a tablet dedicated to audio. The audio is distributed about the house. When I want to stop listening, I simply pause the podcast and resume when I am ready to listen again. Maybe that is the next day. In truth, I listen in the UK and in Spain with a similar setup in each case. There is always a problem when I move from one place to another in regard to keeping track of outstanding listened to podcasts. I tried a number of solutions, but currently I am trialing syncing my podcast clients with gpodder.net. When I return to the UK, we'll see if that works out. I use the open source AntennaPod for my podcast client. I listen to two types of podcasts, tech and politics, mostly centered on anti-Brexit. I've been listening to mintCast for a long time now, right back to the James days. I've enjoyed listening to all the presenters, but think the new team have brought in a certain freshness, which is certainly welcome. Thanks, please keep up the good work, Brian. And I responded, I wonder if you use BT Sync to copy the folder where your podcasts and played information are stored between your two devices. I know I use my podcatcher to also delete the already played items, so that would help there. And I said, something to test, I guess. And Brian replied, thanks for the suggestion. I have used BT Sync for other stuff previously with varying levels of success. One problem I found with BT Sync was battery drain, and that was one of the reasons why I abandoned it. I do, however, run Nextcloud. Maybe I could investigate using that to sync the folder as you suggest. And yes, I will agree, Nextcloud would also be perfect for that. And I have noticed that with BT Sync, you do get less battery life. Plus, if you have a lot of nodes, then your phone is going to transfer the data very quickly, but it's also going to get very, very hot. So maybe I'll eventually look into Nextcloud. And now, as to the next one, I think it would be best if we did not read that. It's a very long on Dale's Plex setup, but we will keep it in the show notes in case anybody wants to go through that.
Yeah, it's a really good resource for setting up Samba shares to get them hooked up with Plex. So this is actually kind of the way that I do it. So Dale kind of hit the nail on the head with this setup. So I really encourage anybody that wants to know more about setting Samba up kind of in a more manual way. If you want to go check that out, check out the show notes. It's going to have a lot of good information from Dale in there. All right, so we're at the end of our vibration, so let's hit the check this out stuff. There are a couple of things that we want to talk about, but let's start off with Josh. What do you have for us?
Yes, so I have been doing some stuff with the mintCast website. So some of you might have noticed that we have a new website live now on mintcast.org. I've been working on it for a really long time now, about a month and a half of just messing about, trying to get it right. So it's currently in beta, and it's a huge upgrade from the theme from 2011 that we were using. We were using WordPress.com for hosting the website, but I approached a local hosting company here in the UK. They're actually based in York, called Bytemark Hosting, and they kindly donated a WordPress server for our website upgrade. So some of the old episodes that weren't working in the early blog posts on the old website, so episode 1 to 120, they're now all fixed on the new website. So if anyone has any problems with the new website or has any suggestions, please feel free to email mintcast@mintcast.org. I'd like to hear your feedback. Hope you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the site looks awesome.
Is that the same hosting company that used to do the Linux Outlaws server hosting?
Probably. They're known for sponsoring things like this.
I seem to remember that. I could be wrong though.
Anything helps, and these guys are amazing. So go check out the site if you haven't gotten a chance. That's where all of our show notes are going to be. So yeah, go find that email we were talking about from Dale just a little while ago. That's where you'll find it.
Hopefully the RSS feeds don't break. Hopefully they won't.
That's the one thing that I'm worried about, but I think we're going to be fine. Bo kind of helped me calm down from that just a little bit.
So far, they seem to have worked. I've tested it on a few devices.
Yeah, definitely. That's what's helped me take a deep breath and step back from that, because I don't want it to break, but I think we're going to be fine. I think it's going to work out perfectly.
If it is broken, then they won't hear this disclaimer to find out.
That is true. Unless you're listening to the live show, yeah, you're not going to hear that.
I'm the odd person out at this time because I can't seem to get the new website to load on my computer with Firefox.
Oh, really? Because it started about an hour after we changed it. It started working for me. It took a little while, but that's just DNS and my DNS caching.
I was working with Josh before the show, and we tried it. I kept changing my VPN to other countries to see if that made a difference, and it didn't. I did open it up on Epiphany web browser, and it worked fine there, and I opened it on Beaker browser, and it worked fine there. But on Firefox, it's not working for me.
You need to clear all your data in your cache.
I did. Several
open it
times.
Up in a private window and see if it works there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's more of a networking issue than a Firefox issue and a caching thing. So yeah, it'll fix itself eventually when the cache takes or when Firefox dumps the cache eventually.
Yeah. Also to mention, the new website's being routed through Cloudflare. So it has some fancy features where it caches the website to make everything load faster. So you should actually notice that the new website will load much quicker than the old one, due to all of the speed improvements that I've tried to make.
Yeah, exactly, and that means that even though the site is centered in the UK, Cloudflare caches it all over the world. So you're going to hit Cloudflare's server near you. So it should be blazingly fast. And Tony, you got some. Check this out.
Yeah, I was listening to another podcast, as I do, and Joe Ressington mentioned a little command line package called YouTube DL, which I'd not heard of before. And basically, it's just a little command line utility that will allow you to download YouTube videos with sticking the URL into the terminal, and it downloads them really good. So there is actually a GUI version of it. I haven't tried that out, but I've put a link to the show notes for the GUI and the CLI version. So if you watch YouTube videos and you want to be able to download them in a simple way, check out YouTube DL.
So Tony, where did you hear about that?
I'm going to have to disagree with you, Tony, because I've brought YouTube DL to this show before, and you've been on it as long as I have. Because we've talked about the scripting that I use with YouTube DL and the fact that it brings down my server.
I've obviously missed that. I've obviously missed it.
Oh, I get it. The other Joe says it, and you listen.
All right, sorry. I was having 40 winks when you mentioned it, Joe. I apologize.
The half dozen times I've mentioned it.
I haven't heard it before, so thank you, Tony.
Ouch.
Oh.
Well, Moss, what do you got for us?
I've got a couple things here. I'll try and hit them quickly. We really are running over this episode. It's a good one to split. KKR acquired Corel. Remember Corel Draw? At one time,
my God, yeah.
At one time, they also owned Dragon Dictate. They were marketing Borland's Quattro Pro spreadsheet and all this stuff. They're apparently still going and going strong somewhere because KKR paid over $1 billion for this. And they're talking about expanding it and growing it. Corel just bought a company called Parallels before getting itself acquired. And Parallels is supposed to help them be able to run across the world in... I'm not describing this well, I'm sorry. Parallels was part of the strategy. Its products help people work seamlessly across multiple platforms, letting employees and IT managers run a unified workflow regardless of the device or operating system, with Parallels providing support for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Chromebook, Linux, Raspberry Pi, and cloud, a timely offering in the current fragmented IT market. So apparently it paid for them to buy Parallels because then they got bought for a nice princely sum. The other thing I have here is that Steve Wozniak has gone on record saying that most people should leave Facebook.
I agree.
There's an article in the links for that, and I deleted mine last month, so I'm on Steve's side. I'll follow the Woz anywhere except to Apple.
Joe, what do you got?
Well, I know it's been mentioned on a couple other podcasts, but I actually went and checked it out myself now. Archive.org has this section where you can play old arcade games directly from the browser. Now, not all of them work. Not all of them work like they should. But the ones that I did find that were working, and it was really fun, and it's a whole lot easier than, going out and setting up the emulators yourselves and getting the images and getting everything set up. You can just play it directly from your browser. Highly recommend it if you get a chance to go to archive.org and check out their arcade section. And I've been waiting for a while now, and I'm probably the only one that cares about this, but the TV show Red Dwarf finally came out with some news. And it's sad news because they were supposed to have a season this year. They were supposed to start recording at the beginning of the year, and they were supposed to be releasing in the fall. And now we find out that they're not going to start recording until the end of this year and release sometime next year, which probably means next fall.
Let it die.
So we're waiting another year for Kat to have something to say.
Dude,
exactly.
That show comes back like every 15 years. Just let it die already.
No.
No,
Doctor Who
we
died.
love Red Dwarf.
Yeah, Red Dwarf is awesome. Next, it'll probably be a reboot or something, but I will still watch it.
All right. So on the announcement side, you actually might already know this, but the show is split into two. We got a lot of feedback both ways, and I think the majority of our group decided we wanted to split this thing. So, yeah, we're gonna split this thing, and you got the
For
first
this
half
show, we
of.
better.
Well, yeah, no. This particular one is. We're coming up on 3 hours if we don't stop this right now. So anyhow, the announcement is we're splitting it. So we split it. But I think that's about it, actually. So in the wrap up, let me hear where we can find all of us fine folks. Joe, where can I find more of you?
Well, if you enjoy my voice, you can catch me on a couple of the other podcasts that I'm on.
do.
That's the Linux Link Tech Show, which is at www.tllts.org.
And if you think our show is long, listen to that one.
Right. Well, the Linux Lugcast isn't short either, and that's at www.linuxlugcast.com. Or you can catch me on MeWe, or you can send me an email at jb@mintcast.org.
And then I know we're going out of order, so forgive me here. Josh, where can we find more of you?
You can find me Josh at mintcast.org, edgebox.org, and All About Code on Twitter.
All right, and now he can get the heck out of here if he needs to. And Bo, where can we find more of you?
I do several podcasts. You can find all of them at undercastnetwork.com. And just to give a few examples, I'm going to invite Joe on to explain to me why Red Dwarf shouldn't die on Electric City Nerds. That's at ecnradio.com. And last night, me and my Australian co-host watched the movie Shazam together and talked during the movie and drank too much. And you can find that at filmflams.com.
Red Dwarf is awesome.
Shazam wasn't bad either.
No, it wasn't bad.
And Moss, where can we find more of you?
Oh, you know where to look for me. You just pick up the rock and you turn it over a couple times. Triad Bardic College website I've got Peaceful Hippo, which I used to actually have a fairly regular blog at, and I might get back to that. I do have a blog on whatever it is, Dreamwidth, that's it. MeWe, my music's on Bandcamp and all over YouTube, mainly because I didn't ever collect it into my page. You can search for Moss Bliss and ignore the young black South African gospel singer. I can be emailed at moss@mintcast.org or at distrohoppersdigest@gmail.com.
And what about you, Tony Hughes?
Hello. Yes, you can find me on Hacker Public Radio on the correspondence page. I'm ID 338. I do an occasional blog at tony-hughes.blogspot.com. I'm on Twitter, TonyH1212, and you can contact me on distrohoppers@gmail.com and also th at mintcast.com .org, sorry. That's
and
it.
you can get Tony Watts in case you need him at tw@mintcast.org, and you can also listen to some of his music at Echoes of Savages on YouTube. And you can find some of me at leochavez.org. You can find me on Twitter at leochavez, and now Full Circle Weekly News as well.
Always worth a listen. It doesn't take much time.
It's news. It's dry. So if you want dry news, that's where you can go. Yeah, for sure. And it's like Ubuntu centric. So it actually does make sense if you listen to this show. But before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make MintCast possible. Josh for working on redesigning our website, setting up the YouTube stream, and providing lots and lots and lots of technical help. Bytemark hosting for providing the new hosting server for the website. Go there, check it out. It's awesome. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. The folks at Hacker Public Radio for the Mumble server we use to communicate. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about every fortnight.
Thanks,
Clem.
Thanks, Clem. Welcome to the Moss Show, where Moss talks about stuff for 45 minutes and doesn't really say anything.
Except he interrupts you saying it.
That's okay. I got the single audio streams. I can pull it out.
Okay.
Okay, I think KDG wanted to say something.
Hey, KDG, what's up?
So you're still recording?
Yeah, we're still
you're
recording.
on the live stream, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. We're done. Like we'll cut this part out. I mean,
We've
unless you say something
closed the
really
show.
funny.
oh, yeah.
And then we'll add it to the beginning.
You better be careful what you say because I'm going to put it in the